Area 51. Area 51 is the most secret military base on Earth, and for most of its life the government refused to admit it even existed. It sits in the Nevada desert, around a dry lake bed, ringed by empty mountains and miles of nothing. There are no tours, no public road reaches it. The airspace above it is sealed off so completely that even military pilots are forbidden to fly through without permission. Getting close on the ground is worse. Long before the fence, the signs begin. They warn that the use of deadly force is authorized against anyone who crosses the line. Hidden sensors track the dust. Unmarked trucks appear on the ridges, watching, saying nothing. For decades, the people who worked there could not tell their own families where they went. Each morning they boarded unmarked white planes in Las Vegas and vanished into the desert, flying to a place that, officially, was not there. We now know some of what it was for. This is where America tested its most secret aircraft. Spy planes and stealth jets so advanced that people who saw them in the sky genuinely believed they were looking at something not of this earth. The base fed decades of alien rumors precisely because the truth was classified. The government finally admitted the base existed only in 2013, in a handful of declassified documents. After more than half a century of silence. But admitting a place exists is not the same as saying what is inside it. We were told the name. We were never shown the rooms. A base you cannot fly over, cannot drive to, and were never meant to know was real. Lake KARACHAY. Lake KARACHAY may be the most radioactive place that has ever existed on the surface of the Earth. From the air, it looks like an ordinary small lake in the Russian countryside. Calm water, low hills, nothing to warn you. That ordinary surface hides something almost beyond belief. For years, a secret Soviet nuclear plant nearby used this lake as a dump. Decades of radioactive waste were poured straight into the water, until the lake itself became a reservoir of pure poison. The numbers are hard to take in. By some reports, standing on the shore of Lake KARACHAY for just 1 hour would have given you a dose of radiation high enough to kill you. Not over years, in an afternoon. Then, in the late 1960s, came the nightmare. A drought dried part of the lake out, and the wind picked up the radioactive dust from the exposed bed and carried it across the region, scattering invisible poison over the homes of 500,000 people. The authorities were so afraid of the lake that they eventually began burying it, filling it in with concrete blocks and rock, trying to lock the radiation down under the ground where the wind could never lift it again. There is no sign warning tourists, because no tourist was ever meant to find it. For most of its existence, the lake did not appear on any public map. It was a secret poison, hidden in plain sight in the open countryside. A quiet, ordinary-looking lake that could end your life in the time it takes to watch a film. Mount YAMANTAU. Mount YAMANTAU is a mountain in Russia that an entire secret city was built to dig into. And no one outside will say why. It rises in the Ural Mountains, a broad, forested peak that looks like any other. But over decades, deep inside it, something enormous has been carved out. Tunnels, chambers. A complex large enough, by some estimates, to shelter tens of thousands of people, buried under solid rock. Around it sit closed towns, places that did not appear on ordinary maps, where the residents are sworn to secrecy and outsiders are not allowed. Whole communities exist for the single purpose of serving whatever is inside that mountain. When other countries asked what was being built, the answers never quite matched. At different times it was called a mine, a store for food, a bunker for leaders in case of war. Each explanation replaced the last. None of them ever fully closed the question. What is certain is the scale and the secrecy. You do not hollow out a mountain and wrap it in hidden towns to store grain. Whatever YAMANTAU is, someone decided it had to survive something. Something bad enough to justify burying a city under a peak. And it is still active. Work has continued there into recent years. Quietly, far from any camera, deep in the Russian wilderness. We can see the mountain. We can see the towns around it. We simply are not allowed to know what the mountain is for. A door in the rock, big enough to swallow a city, and no one will tell you what is waiting on the other side. The Eye's Grand Shrine. The Eye's Grand Shrine is the holiest place in Japan, and almost no one on earth is permitted to see its heart. It stands in a quiet forest of ancient cedar, simple wooden buildings rather than grand stone halls. There is a deep calm here, the kind that has been gathered over more than 1,000 years of unbroken devotion. At its center is a sanctuary the public can never enter. Ordinary visitors may only approach a series of fences and bow before a gate. Beyond that gate, only the highest priest or priestess, traditionally drawn from the imperial family, may walk. And inside, kept in the dark for centuries, is said to rest a sacred mirror, one of the most revered objects in the entire nation. Almost no living person has ever laid eyes on it. It is wrapped, and re-wrapped, and never shown. Then there is the strangest tradition of all. Every 20 years, the shrine is taken down and rebuilt, completely, from new wood, on an empty plot right beside the old one. The gods are moved into the fresh building, and the old one is dismantled. This has been done, again and again, for around 1,300 years. So the shrine is always old and always new at once. The building you would see is never more than 2 decades old. Yet the shrine itself is ancient beyond easy counting. It is not forbidden by fences and guns, but by something quieter and just as absolute: reverence. A door kept shut not to hide a danger, but to protect a holiness the world is simply not meant to look upon. The Vatican Archive. The Vatican Archive holds 12 centuries of the Church's most guarded records. Behind doors the public will never pass. It lies inside the walls of Vatican City, much of it deep underground in a fortified bunker built to protect what it holds. The shelves, lined up end to end, would stretch for over 50 miles. 1,200 years of letters, decrees, and secrets, gathered in one place. For most of its history, no outsider was allowed in at all. Even now, the rules are severe. A scholar must apply, prove their purpose, and even then they cannot simply wander. You may request a specific document, by name, if you already know it exists. You cannot browse, you cannot explore, you are handed only what you ask for, and only if they choose to bring it. And some of it is closed entirely. Records past a certain point are kept sealed, off limits to everyone, for reasons the Church alone decides. For centuries the place was even called the Secret Archive, and the name did its work on the imagination. People pictured hidden gospels, lost knowledge, proof of things the world was never told. The truth is more careful than the legends, but the effect is the same. A vast store of history that you must take almost entirely on trust, because you will never be allowed to read it yourself. Miles of shelves, in a bunker, behind a door that opens only a crack, and only for a chosen few. 1,200 years of writing, and you may see almost none of it. NIIHAU. NIIHAU is a Hawaiian island that has been sealed off from the outside world for over a century. Frozen in another time. It is one of the main Hawaiian islands, green and real, sitting just off the coast of the others. And yet you cannot go there. For more than 150 years, a single family has owned the entire island, and outsiders are simply not allowed to set foot on it. Because the world was locked out, the world also stopped arriving. On NIIHAU, an older Hawaii survives. The native Hawaiian language is still the everyday tongue, spoken the way it was before the islands changed forever. For much of its modern history there were no paved roads, no shops, none of the ordinary trappings of the outside world. The few hundred people who lived there were promised something rare, a life left alone, protected from the rush of everything beyond the water. In exchange, the island stays closed, visitors are turned away, photographs are scarce. What happens on NIIHAU largely stays on NIIHAU. It is forbidden not by danger or by government, but by ownership and by a promise. A whole island held quietly out of reach, kept the way it was, while the rest of Hawaii became a place of resorts and highways and crowds. From a passing boat you can see its green hills. You can see a way of life that has almost vanished everywhere else. You simply cannot land, cannot walk its shore, cannot step into the past it has managed to keep. The Forbidden Isle, they call it, an entire piece of old Hawaii, sealed away just offshore, and closed to almost everyone alive. BHANGARH Fort. Bhangarh Fort is a ruined city in India that the authorities have made it illegal to enter after dark. It sits among dry hills in Rajasthan, a sprawl of crumbling temples, gates, and empty stone houses. Once, long ago, it was a thriving town. Then, fairly suddenly, it was abandoned, and people never truly came back to live inside its walls. There is an official sign at the entrance, placed by the government's archaeology department. It forbids anyone from being inside the fort between sunset and sunrise. A real rule, on a real board, banning people from a ruin once the sun goes down. The reason on paper is safety, the danger of crumbling ruins in the dark. But the reason in every story told nearby is something else. The local legend says the city was cursed, that a sorcerer's spell or a doomed love brought ruin on the whole town in a single night. And that whatever was unleashed never left. By local accounts, those who stayed after dark did not return, or came back changed, refusing to speak of what they had seen. None of this has ever been proven. The stories may be nothing more than stories. But the sign is not a story. The ban is real. Of all the ancient ruins scattered across India, this is the one the authorities chose to lock at nightfall, whatever the true reason. A whole dead city you may walk through in daylight, and must be out of before the dark arrives. What happens there at night? Officially, no one is allowed to find out. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang is the resting place of China's first emperor. And more than 2,000 years after it was sealed, no one has dared to open it. It lies beneath a great earthen mound in central China, a hill that hides an entire underground world. We know it is vast, because we have already found its outer guards. In 1974, farmers digging a well struck a buried army. Thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each with a different face, standing in silent ranks underground. They were only the outermost ring, built to protect a tomb no one has yet entered. The ancient histories describe what waits at the heart of it. They say the emperor lies in a chamber that recreates his entire empire, with the great rivers and seas of China laid out in flowing mercury. A poisoned silver map of a kingdom, sealed in the dark. They speak of crossbows set to fire on anyone who breaks in. For a long time this sounded like pure legend. Then scientists tested the soil over the mound, and found mercury levels far higher than nature should allow, exactly where the rivers were said to flow. The old story had teeth after all. And still, the central tomb has never been opened. The reason is part fear, part care. Digging into it could destroy whatever lies inside, and no one knows what conditions, or what poisons, are sealed in there. So it waits, untouched, a buried empire guarded by an army of clay, under a hill, behind walls of earth, beneath a sea of mercury. The first emperor sealed his door 2,000 years ago. We are still too afraid to knock.